everybody, I'm Cassie Burkich from Burkich Design Group. We help small business owners tell their story with custom logo design, WordPress websites, and strategic marketing plans that are a perfect fit for your small business. We recently held our first Lunch and Learn session. This is something we've been wanting to do for years now, and we finally decided that this is the year to do it. So the very first session was called Color Explained. Our lead designer, Matt, walked us through color theory, how it's made, the basics of color. We even used a really cool tool called Coolers to create a color palette for a fictional Italian restaurant. I hope you enjoy this quick color lesson, and I hope that you will go to burkichdesign.com and let us know what you want to learn of in the future. This took about 15 minutes. We had question and answers at the end. So 30 minutes max during your lunch break. What do you want to learn? What can we help? How can we help support you? Maybe that would be in social media, digital marketing, print marketing, calendars, content. And then on the other side, maybe it's branding, messaging, web design, web performance, any of those things we would love to chat with you on. So just let us know what you want to hear. And we were going to be offering these for free for clients and non-clients as often as we can fit into our schedule. So please let us know at burkichdesign.com and we would be happy to bring you some new content. So let's turn it over to Matt to get a little bit of information on color theory and see what he has to say. Have a great day.
Yeah, guys, thanks for stopping by. This is really cool to be able to do. Hopefully you all can see my screen here rather than my big head on your screen. But we'll get right into it here. Really just a basic overview of color. I feel like color is something that's everyone's interested in at least some point. Everyone has a favorite color. Everyone has like colors they hate, can't stand, etc. So it's always fun to talk about with clients and honestly just people in general, talking about design theory and stuff like that. The first thing we'll sort of get into here is the psychology of color, just because sort of leading off of that point that everyone has a favorite color, everyone also wants to know, like, what does this color mean? What does, this color sort of represent, especially in the context of brands? Unfortunately, the answer is that it depends, sort of all the time. It depends. There are sort of broad strokes that we can paint, like, red being a passionate, bold color, orange being more like vibrant, exciting, lively, blue being like sort of a calm, stable color. But those are really broad strokes, and they can vary from different cultures, different life experiences, even from person to person. If a client tells us, well, I don't like blue, it reminds me of this, who are we to tell them that they're wrong, sort of thing. So really just sort of painting these general colors in really broad strokes. You've got red, we talked about, being passionate, bold, intense. Orange being sort of more vibrant and lively. Yellow is an interesting one because it has a lot of associations with like sun and light. So a lot of like stimulating feelings, hopeful, joyful, that sort of thing. Green has obvious connections to plant life. So, growing, being a natural sort of color. Blue, like we talked about, sort of a more calming and more soothing color, really conveys trustworthiness in brands. So a lot of brands like banks or, lawyers' offices, you see a lot of blues there just to build trust with clients. And then you have purple. Purple's sort of the most interesting one, I think, because you can have a purple that's sort of on the more blue side of purple, where it has more of those calming, soothing characteristics, or you can have one that's more on the red side of purple and sort of more passionate and intense. So it's really sort of a dynamic color that can express a lot of different things depending on what sort of shade it is. So now we've got everyone's basic question of what does my favorite color mean sort of out of the way here. Let's talk about what color is made of. And obviously, color is made of like, color, like that's it. But sort of conceptually talking about like how we describe color as designers, we have three main ways that we do that. We have hue, which is usually what people think of when they ask, well, what color is it going to be? Is it going to be yellow? Is it going to be red? Is it going to be blue, etc.? Basically, think of this as what color of paint you use when you're mixing a color. So if you have a red tube of paint, for example. Then we have saturation, which is sort of how much of that paint you're adding to just a flat gray background. So for example, if you start with a gray base and add just a little bit of that red, it's going to be much less saturated than if you were to, squirt the whole tube out and just make a whole mess of it. Finally, we have value here, which is how light or dark your color is. So I guess in the paint example, the best way to think of this would be how much white or how much black are you adding to your paint, and sort of how light or dark your color is that you're mixing. So now we've got that sort of conceptual stuff out of the way, what like actually physically makes color that like you see. The short answer is that there are two main ways, and it depends on where you're looking at color. The first one, and the one that you're all using right now as you're looking at your screens, is RGB, and it's made up of light. So if you were to look really, really close, like with a magnifying glass at whatever screen you're looking at, you'll see all of these red, green, and blue lights like you see in the image below RGB here. What those lights do is they combine to basically make different colors. So if you have red, green, and blue light all sort of emanating from these lights, you'll get white, and all of the colors in between there are made up of a mixture of those colors. It's known as an additive process just because you add colors in order to get to white. On the other hand, you have CMYK colors, which are made of ink. So if you have any print jobs, anything like that, basically anything that isn't emitting light, that falls under the CMYK umbrella. If you've ever had a printer that constantly runs out of one color of ink, you're very familiar with this, probably frustratedly so, that these three colors sort of make up all the other colors. In general, RGB sort of gives you more bright and vivid and a wider range of colors than CMYK would. But obviously, for some applications, CMYK is the only way that we have of, getting color onto a surface. For example, if I'm wearing a shirt, I'm not going to have the shirt lit up with, all these tiny lights. So that's not very practical. CMYK is known as a subtractive process just because you subtract colors in order to get to white, similar to how RGB is an additive process for the opposite reason. So now I want to sort of talk about value and contrast. If you recall back to when we talked about like conceptually what makes up a color, you'll remember value, which is how much white or black paint, you sort of add to the color, or how light or dark it is. Value is really important to understand because it's what creates color contrast within palettes. So in this top example, we have two colors that are two different hues, right? They're wildly different. One's red, one's blue. They're both like pure color. So, they should stand out from one another, right? Well, when we take all the color out, so we remove all the saturation from the colors, you'll get the image on the right here, which is very hard to read. And, sort of to go along with it, if you might notice that the text on the left here sort of vibrates around the edges when you look at it. That's because there isn't a lot of contrast between the colors' values. If we take the set of images on the bottom here, the text on the left is much easier to read. Your eyes don't really hurt that much. And when we remove all the color, when we remove all the saturation from these colors, it's still very easy to read. And that's a really important concept in developing color palettes, just because when we sort of do that for a whole brand, we want to make sure that we're getting a large mix of color values as well as like different color hues. For like the color palette that we use might have like multiple blues or multiple yellows or something like that. but they'll have different values so that they can work together and work on top of each other in different ways. So for the end of this, I sort of want to go through building a sample color palette with you guys. And this is something that like you can do right along with me here, or on your own time, or don't do it at all. I'm not your boss. But we're going to take this sample brand called Roma's Family Restaurant. They're an Italian American owned restaurant specializing in sandwiches and comfort food, casual vibe, high quality, and they want guests to feel very comfortable like they're visiting for a family dinner or something like that. So we're going to use this tool called Coolers. This is a color generation tool or a color palette generation tool that some designers use. There's millions of these out here. It doesn't have to be specifically this one. The concept behind this is that if we press spacebar a bunch of times, it'll generate random colors here. And that might make you think, well, we're sort of just shooting in the dark here as designers, right? Like we're just letting AI randomly generate some color palettes for us. Well, I mean, we can, but it wouldn't be a very good job then. You know, we have to be sort of more thoughtful about how we build these colors up. So the first thing that I, sort of keep in mind from the creative brief is how the brand wants customers to feel, and they want them to feel welcome. They want them to feel warm, and we've got a whole bunch of warm colors right here, actually. So let's see what we can pull out of here. I really like this yellow here. So let's move that to the center here and lock this. And I think that this dark red will go really well with this yellow, both in terms of contrast of values, as well as them both being warm colors. So they sort of mix well together in that way. Now, we don't want to overwhelm people, so maybe we grab like a cooler color, even if it's just like a cooler shade of yellow that's maybe on the lighter side. So let's cycle through some more colors here, see what it gives us. I kind of like this color. I think we might need to lighten it up a little bit though. So let's go into here and we'll just lighten it up a hair. We'll lock that color. And now I sort of want to give us something really, really dark, really deep to give us a color to work with for like text, for example. Looking for like maybe a super deep blue like this, but maybe go even deeper. Let's go down to like here. Move that over here. I want to see how it contrasts with this dark red. And I think it could be a little bit darker to contrast a little bit more. So there we go. Like we're almost getting into black territory there. We'll lock that in. And, ooh, I quite like that blue actually. That's really nice. And I think it contrasts enough with this yellow, I think, but I also think that when we're designing for this brand, we don't necessarily have to use these colors on top of each other, right? Like this blue can just be like a little accent call out that we use for different things. And that sort of thought process is, how we as designers develop these color palettes, right? It's thinking about how they're going to be used, with one another, and sort of building so that it's versatile, but that it still gets your point across. Like all these colors, especially this deep red, sort of gives like an old school, like going to grandma and grandpa's house for dinner vibe to me. And it complements really well with this golden yellow here. So yeah, that's just sort of a peek into what goes into building these color palettes. It's a lot of educated trial and error, right? So we try colors, see that they don't work, and then we try to sort of diagnose why they don't work and then find something that works a little bit better than that.
Thanks, Matt. That was fun. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And please go to burgagedesign.com and let us know what you want to learn next. We're here for you and all of your small business dreams.